Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Gym Owner's Guide to the Galaxy. This podcast is a production of Sweat Angels. Sweat Angels helps gym owners generate friend-to-friend referrals on Facebook. Every month, thousands of affiliate gyms, group fitness clubs, yoga studios, and martial arts schools rely on Sweat Angels to help them grow. To learn more about Sweat Angels, head to causley.com/Sweat Angels. That's causely.com/Sweat Angels, or just search for us on Facebook. Thanks for listening today. I'm John Ruggie.
And I'm Matt Sharp. In today's episode, we'll talk to Jarrett J.P. Perlmutter, founder of Brick Sports Performance. In 2011, J.P. built Brick's first location in Los Angeles on the foundation of a strong brand. In just a few years, he's expanded Brick and opened multiple locations both in the U.S. and in Europe. Today, J.P. will tell us the story behind Brick and share his advice for building a brand from the ground up. All right, so me and JP go way back, and very, very excited to have JP on the show. Brick is, super strong brand in the fitness community, and just really appreciate you being on the show, JP. And could you start off just kind of telling us a little bit about who you are and kind of the genesis of the Brick brand?
Certainly, yeah. First off, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate doing this. So, my name is Jarrett Perlmutter. I go by JP, born and raised out in Los Angeles, California. One of the few people that's actually born and raised and still out here. Started in the fitness, really got my first taste in the fitness game through martial arts. Had been involved in that my entire life. Got into competitive martial arts early on, stuck with that all the way through college. Was told by the parents if I wanted to have a professional fight career and or continue in the martial arts, I should also get a college education so that I could fall back on something if it didn't work out. So I adhered to mom's rules, did the college thing, continued in the fight game. Afterwards, was able to follow my passion and try to achieve all of my goals and aspirations in the fight game. Turned professional, went into the fight world, had a really successful career in that, used that and my experience through college and some other business that I'd started to get into the commercial martial arts location game. And that was my first taste of getting into the concept of building a brand within the martial arts world. So you fast forward after years of doing that, moving back to Los Angeles, California, and then deciding to open up a chain of group class instruction facilities. It kind of took me from the world of martial arts that specialized in that traditional vibe into the world of generalized fitness. And so that kind of leads me to where I guess we're getting into this discussion today, but that's really JP in a package. Started in traditional martial arts, got into the professional fight game, used the mix of the knowledge of the world of martial arts, commercialized locations, membership-based business, and college education to package them together and then try to develop something in the boutique fitness market in my hometown of Los Angeles. And so here we are today, and we're having this discussion.
So one of the things I would love for you to talk about, so at some point you're out in LA and you start to want to go down this path of opening up Brick Sports Performance. So how did you go from, attending another gym or like writing down these ideas? Because I remember when you guys first started, it was, especially the brand stuff, which is really relevant for this conversation, the brand stuff was really dialed in like day one. And that's something that you don't see in a lot of startup gyms, especially. So could you talk a little bit about like when you decided to open a gym, what were maybe some of the mental steps or some of the things you wrote out, or what are the things that you really dialed in, especially brand-wise, before you started?
Yeah, sure thing. So the story continued on that when I moved back to Los Angeles, I got kind of hooked on this functional fitness, phenomenon that had been taking the world by storm. And while I was in one of these locations in LA that was doing really well, by the way, I just noticed a lot of holes and gaps. It didn't really have a market presence. It didn't have a brand identity. It had no real structure to the message that it was trying to deliver. So while I was there, I was constantly taking these mental notes with these, always going through that thing of how could I make this better? How could I take this proven model and make it better? And then how could I work on that and do something that's new and exciting? And constantly developing these ideas in my head, I realized there was a hole in the market, and it was something that I wanted to attack. Now, if we back off of that, really because of, I guess, just something that I was born with, I always had this affinity for brands and brand concepts. I would always look into brands and brand stories. Why did they call it Nike? What is the significance of Coca-Cola? Why do they use red? What do the swoops and stripes always mean? It was really just some weird affinity that I had, and an attraction to this concept since I was a kid. So when I was in the martial arts world, sticking with the systems that we have in place of being extremely disciplined and having a clear and concise means of protocol and what your location means to you, it was kind of already ingrained in me. I was kind of doing it out of intuition without really knowing I was doing it, because all the details mattered to me. I was never one to scratch a note on a piece of paper and slap it on a mirror to say, hey, please do X, Y, and Z, or there's this event coming this weekend. I wanted always everything to be branded properly, if you'd say, or always have the proper brand voice. So as this year went along that I was in this other boutique fitness center, I realized there was a hole in this ever-growing market, and it was time for me to step in. And so early on, from the second even looking for a location, I knew that I could implement this kind of weird, I guess, knowledge and know-how and special intuition that I had into my own space, and that would allow me to be several steps ahead of an already excitingly market that was blowing up. So really that was like the foundation of where it started. I wish I had a better story of 20 years of brand education and some large corporation, but it really wasn't.
No, a lot of branding, and just in my experience, a lot of guys are really good at it. They have the instinct, and then they're just really protective of what they've developed or what the team or the culture has developed. So one of the things that you guys, I noticed when you guys started out, you had very specific color schemes. You had a very specific look that you wanted at the gym. You had specific fonts. And could you walk through like maybe how you came to say the color and the fonts, and then maybe talk a little bit about why those things are important?
Yeah, absolutely. So also entering into that world of strange fixation of branding and brand development was always logo for me. And when I was younger, even within the martial arts world, creating a logo that would work on different items, or as we would call it, like different collateral-based material that we could use, was always important. Because you see people with these extremely long names or grossly descriptive and over-busied, if I can create words on this call, over-busied logos that just didn't really work well. From afar or even close, you never knew what it was, right? So these things had always stuck in my mind. So when I came into developing my own concept, I wanted to create something. First off, I'm in LA. So I'm in a market that's extremely trend-based. They really feel like they're industry forward. They're always ahead of the game. And so at the time, opening up clubs and restaurants in the area was a big thing to use a singular name. No thes, no I don't even know what the vocabulary, what the proper word is for it, but kind of a word that would precede or even supersede any type of name. You would just have a single word brand name, and that's what I wanted. And so while I was going through it, I'd come up with all these different concepts. And at the time in our industry, wacky names everybody was going for, Death CrossFit, especially in the CrossFit world. It was like Death CrossFit, melt your face off fitness, but get so skinny you're on the verge of anorexia boot camp. And so, I'm
really
exaggerating, but
names.
It's just all pigeonholed names. So that was the first step. And it really is not the most awesome story, but when I came up with Brick, it originally was going to be like the Brick House. And then it was a friend of mine who's a local who said, why would you do the Brick House if you could just be brick and that's just sexier? Looks sexy on clothing, looks sexy on a wall. Like, you have to think how sexy it looks everywhere you look. How easy is it to decipher and print, etc. So once we pinned that down, it was really simple. I just started using the interwebs, and I started searching for colors that were the most popular, colors of future seasons, colors that bring, colors that incite emotions in people. And that's where I came up with the gray and orange that you see so much of within our brand identity. And then we took it to the next step, which was, well, let's not just use any orange. Let's create an orange that can be something that we can really put our mark in. And so we came up with, a PM021 color, and we can now utilize that through everything we do. and our ice gray and our wolf grays. Like, we have specifics to everything there is. So without getting too far on, off tangents, really the idea was, okay, from a simplistic standpoint, we've got a name, we've got a color scheme, so that's good. Now we've got a simple name with only 5 letters in it. Let's develop a logo, because your logo isn't always necessarily your brand. However, your logo should identify with your brand. And we started to package all this stuff together. And once you start to do that, and really, if I could leave something for everybody, is to know that it's not that formal. It's not that it's not that difficult to understand. You just lay it all out and you start to create the story on paper of what your brand, if you could just use that as the over umbrellaing idea, what that's actually going to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that process you went through, and I like how you talk about it involving more than just the logo, because I think at some levels it's easy to think that a brand as well, it's just a logo and maybe a color and maybe a font, but it's really more than that. It's really both a visual and a linguistic way of representing who you are to your customers. So can you talk about how the Brick brand has evolved to kind of what you say about yourself, what your voice is, like what your attitude is, all those things that the logo reflects, but have to be thought about just as intentionally?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did was I started with 3 key points. And again, this isn't stuff that I created. People way smarter than I am did this well before I have, right? So I just followed on the shoulders of giants, really. And I also want to make a note that this isn't like all inclusive, right? There's no one way to do this. There's just the way that I did it, and it seemed to work. So I just would like to make that point. So the first 3 major points that I used when I was going throughout this process was I wanted to make sure that I had a neutral name that could stand alone, and it's not location specific. So I didn't want my brand to be cornered with the word Los Angeles in it, because I knew that if I wanted to expand out, if I wanted to be able to move into other markets, other cities, other products, I didn't want to be location specific. And I also wanted to have something neutral that wasn't tagged to any type of religion, creed, or color. It was very neutral in its state. All right. So obviously the word brick, it's not offensive. It's not vulgar. It's very simple. So that was the first key. The next thing is I wanted to make sure that within my name, it would be clean and concise so that I could develop the messaging around it, and that the name doesn't necessarily tell the story. Because sometimes, or as like you were just talking about, like, how do you develop that over time? But if your name tells the story, it's hard to change the story, right? Like if the word, I guess I would say if Nike had made their brand and all their logo, brand awareness, brand voice around the idea that they were Nike footwear, it would be hard to become an active lifestyle company because they would just be Nike footwear.
Sure.
Now, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't work.
Apple Computer did that. For years they're Apple Computer, and then they dropped the computer when they no longer had computers as their pride and joy.
Perfect. And from what I hear, they're doing fairly well as a company. I haven't researched them, but
I've heard
I
about
guess
that.
they're kind of a big deal. Yeah. So then the third key point is I want to make sure that it's consistent. I want to make sure that the logo and my brand message is consistent, even if the industry changes and shifts. So I need something that can stand the test of time, right? So I'm a big classic car guy, and one of my favorite car shows is Ken Diggett Designs. And one thing he always says is when he does car rebuilds, he wants to make sure he does a build that will stand the test of time, because the trend will always be, well, in the 90s they liked a lot of chrome. In the early 2000s they liked big wheels. So if you spent $150,000 on a car that had a lot of chrome and now you want to sell it, it's no longer like a market exciting factor. And so I wanted to have something that could just stand the test of time.
That makes sense.
So those were three key points. Neutral name that could stand alone, non-location specific. Second one is it's clean and concise in its messaging, and the name doesn't always necessarily tell the whole story in case the story needs to change. And then the third one is it's consistent even when the industry changes and shifts, and it will stand the test of time.
So you've got the Brick brand in how many locations now? I know you just added 1 or 2 recently.
That's right. So there's 6 in the U.S. and there's 2 in Spain that are licensed partners.
Okay. So can you talk about how the Brick brand has affected your ability to grow to those new locations, and especially internationally? I think that's a really unique aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being that this isn't necessarily a business seminar, we know that all of our systems and procedures need to be in place, right? You have to have solid operating concepts to make sure that the business is replicatable, it's scalable, and repeatable across all your locations. Well, just as important as that is your brand voice, your brand messaging. So we just use like analogies and examples. If I open a Brick in Los Angeles, let's say, and it's a high-end boutique health and wellness center that focuses on group class instruction. That's Brick in a nutshell. I can repeat it 1,000 times. Well, if I take that, and that's a message that's clearly defined in all of our collateral in Los Angeles, and then I move that to New York, and now they try to create a story that's more localized for New York, it loses its brand identity and it loses its representation that we've had in LA. So now it's as if you're starting all over. And then also that affects the experience, right? There's a level of awareness that you create, and there's a level of experience. If somebody walks into a Brick in LA, then they travel to New York, and it's an entirely different experience, you may not be creating the loyalty you'd hope for. People like to have that comfort, right? We just use the Schultz model for Starbucks. He wanted to make sure that no matter which Starbucks you went into, you automatically felt like you were at your local hometown your local hometown Starbucks.
Yeah.
Because there's that level of comfort. And so that's really what was important.
So I know that you and I have had this conversation many, many times about being very protective of the brand and the way it's displayed and how it's used to develop the community, and mainly being protective of it because it's so important in community development. And even recently, I remember you and I talked about, and this is something we see, I'm sure, with lots of gyms, and JP and I have both consulted. You see a lot of gyms that are really weak in brand, and then they wonder why it's hard to develop a community. And one of the things I know that we talked about the other day, like if you went to, let's say, the Dallas Cowboys and you went into their pro shop or you watched a game in their stadium, I think you would be very clear like what their colors were, what their symbols are, what their logo is. And really those people love to rally behind that. Like they need something strong and clear to rally behind. And especially in the gym industry, when you go into one and you see one that's just kind of a mess with the branding, even if everything else is dialed in, it's really hard to rally those people behind the brand.
They feel like they're part of a tribe.
Yes.
I was just about to say, it just comes from any book you read on tribal leadership, right? It's basically just pageantry at its best. We are evolutions of tribes of people. So we always want to be able to stand behind markings that we can use that create a common factor that unifies us, which is basically the breakdown of the word community, right? It's a common goal, common idea. There's a commonality amongst groups of people, and that's what unifies us or creates unity. So that's our community. So if we have a common brand, we have a common logo, a common color set, common markings, then we know that that's one visual proofing for us to be able to come together as a community. And so I don't know how better way to explain it than really just dating back. And again, this is something that's been proven over the test of time.
Yeah. So like if you go into a gym and there's 5 different logos and 10 different fonts and the colors are a mess, it sounds really silly, but think if the United States had 10 different flags. Like It sounds silly because wait a minute, like we have this one thing that we get behind. Why wouldn't a gym owner try to develop that themselves,
So JP, if someone is a gym owner listening to this now and they're thinking to themselves, oh crap, okay, so I see how well JP's done with his brand. I'm thinking through this, I realize that my brand really hasn't been that well defined, or I've defined it incorrectly based on the type of people I'm targeting. What are the steps they need to take to go through that rebranding process and get themselves with the right brand?
So if you're in that position, generally it's for one of two reasons. Either your business isn't headed in the proper trajectory that you'd hope for, so you need massive change, right? For massive results, for any type of massive movement in your business, you need massive change. So really there are no specific rules to follow by because you're changing the game up. So you can flip it on its head and start from scratch, release it, and try to rally your tribe against a singular representation, right? A common representation to unify everybody. Usually that's pretty simple to do. If you're in a position where you've had success in your business and it's just no longer telling the proper story, the way that we have found in the past and the way that I've researched and read is to actually get your tastemakers, to get your core group, to get your core tribesmen and tribeswomen involved in that process. Because if your core leaders are in support of whatever said new brand is, they're the ones that are going to influence the rest of the community. So just like when, if I can use examples, like when Jay-Z took over for the Brooklyn Nets, right? I believe that they had launched a massive new brand change campaign. He changed, I think, their main core color, changed some of the logos, and he made a new twist to it. Well, through his influence in today's society, obviously through music and everything else that he does, he was able to rally everybody around him to say, this is why this is amazing. This is going to be our new tribal markings, basically. And he, as an influencer, getting other influencers to influence, then got everybody to follow along. That's what great tribal leaders do. And I could be stood corrected, but I believe within the NBA and possibly in pro sports, the Brooklyn Nets merchandise is some of the best selling out of any pro sport team in the United States. When I believe it had gone from one of the worst.
So it's really about finding the people who can help you define or redefine the brand, talking with them, understanding, how they feel about it, and then spreading that broader message to the community and then actually making that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that we don't need to go down that path, but the apparel sales, if you have a strong brand, is definitely something that can help a business. And if the branding is all over the place, then it's really tough to run a good pro shop and have a lot of apparel sales if it's just kind of a mess,
You've got to ask yourself, why would someone even buy apparel? It's not, functionally, you can get that equipment anywhere, but like you said earlier, JP, about being part of that tribe and building that, for you, it's the Brick Nation. The clothing allows you to identify yourself with that tribe in a way you really couldn't otherwise outside the gym.
Yeah, and as you guys just mentioned, it is really important to take into account in any fitness business. You still want to have a retail component. It's another revenue stream, but it's also your marketing, getting T-shirts, etc. out there. And if it's not moving off the shelves, it's as easy as doing a survey and asking your community why. And I feel like so many owners of businesses, they basically put the onus of the logo so deep inside of them that they can't have discussion about it. It's like a dictatorship of the logo. And when really, if they're going to have a strong community that's going to help support the brand, they need to get them involved in that. And it's as easy as asking around.
Yep.
Why are T-shirts not moving off the shelf?
So if we had to do like brass tacks, if you had to recommend, if you somebody listening to this and they want to leave this podcast with maybe some things to do and some things to look at, and they're looking for advice, what would you say?
All right. Well, the first thing I'd ask them to do is read Simon Sinek's book of Start with the Why. Understand what your why is. What is it that you're trying to do? What's your position in the industry? What's your brand voice? What is your purpose? So you can do all those fancy, sexy, soul-searching words. What's your purpose? What's your passion? So first thing is go out and read that, and then create your list of why it is you do what you do, what it is you're trying to do, and who you're trying to do it for, and what the result of that is going to be. All right, now that you've got that figured out, I go by five key brand components. First is I would want to know, what is my position going to be in the market? Because logo and brand can necessarily be two different things, but I want to make sure that they speak the same language. I want to make sure they have the same brand position. So that's the first thing. All right. How does my brand position describe what it is that I do? All right. What makes it unique? How will my community benefit from it, from my products and services? And what are my key differentiations from the competition? That's the first. The second is, what is my brand promise? All right. What is the promise that my brand is going to deliver to the customers every single day, every single time they have a visual, aesthetic, kinesthetic, whatever it might be, an audible connection to my brand, to my locations? Then from that, I need to have what that promise is going to look like, and I always have to consider my team as well, my staff. It's all got to make sense. So I have to have a brand promise. The next thing is that I want to have a brand personality.
what are the traits that are going to illustrate what it is that we do? Maybe it's in the logo. People like to put quirky little symbols and signs. They create their little words like, we're brick and we use the word with the letter B. So we give our B's personalities: be fit, be disciplined, be independent. So we have all of these different traits that all of our, with multiple traits, they say like between 4 to 6 are ideal. So even in our words that carry traits, somebody can attach themselves to at least one of those traits, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got, just to go back through, you've got your brand position, your brand promise, your brand personality. Your fourth one is, what's your brand story? Your brand story is, what's your history? How does your history add value to your community? So it could be a great story about how you came through the professional sports ranks, got an injury, and you found whatever it is you did that helped you recuperate from your injury, and that's in your brand story, whatever it may be. And then your last thing is what's your brand associations? What are the specific physical artifacts that make up the brand? Your name, your logo, your colors, taglines like I mentioned with the be fit, be this, be that, or we've actually pulled those aside. We made those brand characteristics, and we have now a brand tagline, which is fitness done different. What's your imagery look like, and is it consistent? Use it over and over again. So you've got brand position, brand promise, brand personality, brand story, and brand association. And I can provide a link for you guys that you can read about this stuff, because again, like I said, it's somebody way smarter than I am with a lot more success than I've had doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we can add that in the show notes as well. So so that's a great way to wrap it up. And like I said, we are very, very excited to have you on the podcast, and really appreciate, Brick has built an amazing brand, and there's definitely a lot of tactical kind of takeaways from this, I think, for basically any gym owner. So again, JP, appreciate having you on the show.
JP, thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's been fun.
All right, man.
All right, take care. Thanks again for listening today. The Gym Owner's Guide to the Galaxy was produced by Matt Sharp, Jeremy Russell, and me, John Ruggie. To make sure you catch every episode, search for The Gym Owner's Guide to the Galaxy on iTunes or wherever you download podcasts. We're always looking for industry leaders to interview on the show, so if there's anyone you'd like to see us feature on a future episode, let us know at podcast@causley.com. That's cause.ly.com.
We are a production of Sweat Angels, the #1 referral program for gym owners. Sweat Angels helps drive new members at your gym by combining Facebook check-ins with giving back. If you haven't heard of us, just go to causley.com/Sweat Angels or search for us on Facebook. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Gym Owner's Guide to the Galaxy.